do my intro. So, welcome to the eighth webinar. Oh no, that's wrong. Wait, that's completely wrong. This is the ninth webinar. Okay, take two. Welcome to the ninth webinar on outreach and action. Um, it's February 3rd, 2026. What we'll do today is instead of introductions, because you've heard from me before. Um, I'll go right into the content. We'll talk about recapping recommendation strategies. Um, sorry, train of thought. We'll I'm going to quickly go over what I talked about in the last webinar on recommendation strategies. Then we'll transition and talk about outreach strategies and examples of past winners, and then we'll close. So the goal of today for me is to provide some insight or some ideas for making sure that you have or making sure that you're working collaboratively in the community and maybe identifying ways that you can broaden the impact of your project, right? Okay, and thank you. I see the chat. Thank you for reminding me. I wanted to say oysters, but I wanted to be precise. So measuring oyster efficiency in turbid stormwater conditions with tannins and mangrove prototype. Love, love, love. Okay, so this talk or this webinar will be focused a little bit more on the recommendation side. So this is from the perspective of post research. So once you have your research data, where do we go from there? And if it's still important to think about if you're designing a research experiment or if you're gathering research data right now, it's important to think about the end. Keep the end in mind and think about, all right, how am I going to design a project that has a large community impact, right? Because if that's your goal, that will influence your research design and the way you're collecting data. Um, so the first part, I'm going to skip over that. Introductions. Again, I'm Josiah Williams. I'm the Senior Program Manager for Quality of Life, yada yada. Okay, so recapping our last webinar, there are just two things I want to leave you with. So when you're developing recommendations, um, or potential solutions. So specifically for your project, Adrian, measuring oyster efficiency, once you have that data and maybe that prototype, um, the question then is, where do we go from there, or how do we use this data in a productive way, right? So when we're thinking of and welcome. If you're just now joining us, if you could take a minute in the chat, put what school you're from and what your quality of life issue is, that would be very helpful. Um, so when you're thinking about your solution or your recommendations to solve this quality of life issue, it's really important to answer these four questions. And these are check boxes in the official rubric for the competition. Um, so it's important for you to be clear, but it's also important for you to get as many points as possible in the scholarship competition. So the four questions are number one, what is your recommendation? Being very clear and precise about what you are trying to do, right? Number two, what results from your field research indicate the need for the recommendation? So, what data did you gather or collect that pointed you in this direction, right? Um, Number three, what are the potential obstacles? So, where can you see some difficulty in implementing your recommendation? What will make it difficult? Maybe it's financial burdens, maybe it's scalability, so it's hard to make thousands of prototypes. Um, and then question four, what do you expect your recommendation to accomplish? So this is looking at the future again, keeping the end in mind. What is the goal or what is the purpose of your recommendations, right? So all of these should be informed by your field research. So any experiments, any interviews, any surveys that you're doing, that data should inform your recommendations, your recommended solutions to this quality of life issue. Okay, reading from the chat. Hello, Miami from James Madison High School. Quality of life issue is aiding immigrant elementary school students and their families assimilating into their new environment socially and academically. Love, love, love. Um, Wonderful. So be thinking about these four questions when you're in the research phase, or if you're not there yet, or if you're in the data analysis phase. I think keeping them in mind will be really helpful for framing the narrative of your entire project, right? Okay, so additionally, some things that we talked about in the last webinar, what makes a strong recommendation or what makes strong recommendations? They are detailed and clear. So, in answer to question number one, what is your recommendation? Making sure that you write clearly and very detailed. My recommendation is this. It entails this, 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 this. Um, Imagine like you're writing a guidebook that a bunch of other people will be reading, trying to do the same thing as you. So how would you write it for this audience, right? If the goal was for them to copy or for them to implement your work as well. Strong recommendations are also realistic. This is a huge, huge uh, important thing for this project is making sure that your solutions are realistic and can get done. Because the next step after your recommendations is to take action, right? So we have to be able to take action to have any impact in the community. So you want to make sure that you're recommending solutions that can be done in this lifetime, can be done today, and don't have significant constraints, right? And then lastly, strong recommendations are creative. So they are new ways of solving an issue. They think outside the box. They don't just repeat what's been done. And a correlate to this creativity is innovative. Strong recommendations are innovative. They take one additional step. They build on what's already being done, or they redesign a solution that's already in existence to make it more efficient, to make it more effective, to make it better, right? So, what does that mean though? Because innovative is a very vague term. It can mean almost anything. So, what does that mean specifically in terms of this project? And I like to think about it in this way. So, innovation, I like to contrast it with insanity, right? So, innovation is this is a great video right here of a dog who pushed a chair to the counter, stepped on the chair, and was able to reach the top of the counter before the dog was too short to reach just on its hind legs. So it innovated, it decided, or it thought, it thought, it pushed the chair and used this tool to help it reach the top of the counter, right? This is innovation. Um, on this right-hand side, we have some insanity going on, a dog chasing its tail over and over and over and over and over. And the definition of insanity, the technical definition of insanity is repeating the same action, expecting a different result. Repeating the same action, but expecting a different result. So you're doing the same thing over and over and over, but you expect something new to happen. Th- This is the definition of insanity because the same input will not generate a different output. We have to change the input, we have to change what we're doing in order to change the outcome, right? Um, and this this is a frame of mind that I want you to have is you're thinking about solutions, thinking about recommendations to solve your quality of life issues, or not to solve, but to work on your quality of life issues, right? Because some issues will always exist, but we need to develop systems to mitigate them or to ameliorate the effects, to make less how harmful they are, right? Um, so I don't want you to go into thinking, I'm going to solve world hunger. No, let's focus a little bit. Anyway, that's an aside, but I want you to use this framework of innovation versus insanity in thinking about recommendations. How can we build on what's being done, or how can we improve what's being done? And sometimes that means breaking the system and developing something new, or thinking about agriculture, thinking about education in a brand new way, because we don't want to fall into the cycle of insanity. Okay, so now we're going to move into some new content, and this section will be specifically on outreach strategies, and this comes from what I've noticed. Oops. This comes from what I've noticed in this position, in reviewing hundreds of proposals. What really separates the best proposals from the ones that don't advance very far in the competition, are a couple of things. And the first one is influence and impact. Some of the most outstanding proposals, these students have a really clear understanding of their influence and impact, right? So it's the analogy I like to use are these spheres. We have spheres of influence, spheres of control, and spheres of concern. So the one closest, most adjacent to you or directly around you, imagine you're in the center right here. These are things you have direct control over. Maybe you have a say in your school because you're in student government. Maybe you have a say in your classroom because you have really strong relationships with your classmates, right? And then you have influence. So influence could be a student government position where you're leading oh, what's it called? School assembly meetings for the entire school. Or maybe you're doing the morning announcements. You have some influence or you have some platform by which you can influence others, right? And then we have areas of concern. And these might be like um, still within our circle, but more outside. So these could be your entire borough. You're concerned for your entire borough. Um, you're able to travel in your entire borough, but maybe you don't necessarily have the same influence in Flushing as you do in Jackson Heights because you live in Jackson Heights, right? Um, so these are areas of concern. We don't have as much direct impact there, but we have concern because it is a part of our community, right? And so, s- uh, what I want to push you in your projects is to think about clearly these different levels or these different areas of you and your project, right? What do you have control over? Where do you have influence? And where do you have concern? Specifically, when you're thinking about recommendations and implementations, okay? And so if you have a clear understanding of these circles, then it becomes really easy to outreach and to work with others, form collaborations, partnerships, and coalitions to to do a number of things. So another strategy that I see some of the best uh, proposals using are they do a lot of research on other people, organizations, entities who are working to improve the same issue, and they work to develop partnerships, right? So again, thinking about these three spheres of influence and control, um, let's say there's a project that, or actually, I'm going to use your example, Miriam, about um, aiding. Oh, someone else came in. Welcome, welcome. If you're just now joining us, please take a minute in the chat, put your name, what high school you're from, and what your quality of life issue is. And we're talking about recommendation strategies, specifically about outreach and forming collaborations with maybe other individuals or other organizations. No worries about being late at all. I'll stay a little bit, I'll stay after, and we can go over what you missed. But the session is also being recorded, so you will have access to that afterwards as well. Um, excuse me. But I want to take the example of um, aiding immigrant elementary school students and their families in assimilating to a new environment socially, academically, right? So if that's the quality of life issue, let's do some research on are there other nonprofits that are working with families who with immigrant families, right? Are there government agencies, New York City government commissions that are working with immigrant families who just moved to New York City, right? And then let's reach out to them and say, "Hi, I'm a student from X high school. I'm a part of this program working to improve the lives of da da da," and explain your quality of life issue, what you're doing, and then say, "I'd love to talk to you about your work. I'd love to learn more about what you do," right? I think it's always great to start with, "I'd love to learn more." Um, People love talking about themselves, but you can also gather a lot of information that you can then use to your advantage and say, I love how you're working specifically with elementary and middle school students. I'm interested in working with elementary school students, and I would love to collaborate on developing resources. Or I would love to utilize your resources and share them with these schools that I'm partnered with, right? So researching who else is working on this same idea or same topic can be really beneficial for you in, again, going back to these circles of influence, um, maybe areas of concern you want to do outreach to your entire borough, but you don't necessarily have influence in every neighborhood, but these larger organizations do. So forming a partnership can help you grow your circle, your sphere of influence, help you reach these people in this neighborhood, people in this neighborhood, people in this neighborhood over here, and then you'll have direct influence or direct control to share resources with with students and family members all over your borough, right? So I hope that makes sense. And with these two strategies, again, just recapping, it's really important for you to consider where do you have control, where do you have influence, like a platform, and then where are you concerned about? What is your target community with your quality of life project? And then do some research about other people, organizations, institutions that are working almost side by side or in the same lane, on the same road or highway um, as you, and try to form partnerships, try to work together, build on what they're doing, innovate what they're doing. Um, because one thing that is really important, and this is kind of an aside, but one thing that's important for community impact work is to form coalitions, to form connections with the other people around you and in your community. Because we can only do so much by ourselves. It's in collaboration with others that we have as large an impact as possible. Okay, so moving into section 4, I'm going to go through 3 examples of past winners who have really exemplified this well, this idea of outreach and action, partnership and collaboration. So the first example is Peace of Mind, and this is a first place competition winning student. His quality of life issue was specifically on Alzheimer's and dementia, and his implementation was in a software that uh, that predicts, sorry, lost my train of thought, that predicts one's risk of developing dementia based on different health factors. Okay. Um, so I want you to think about, as I go through these different examples, how this student reached out to and collaborated with experts. And so this is his proposal, and I want to highlight this section. So this is his field research and analysis section. He writes, I had the opportunity to conduct in-depth interviews with neuroscience researchers and neurologists within Mount Sinai Health System for this analysis. The interviews were based around 10 questions, yada yada. But I wanted to highlight this because he reached out to and interviewed experts, neurologists and neuroscience researchers specifically from Mount Sinai Health System, right? So this partnership or this collaboration with Mount Sinai was able to provide him some research data that he used to adapt his implementation and to make it as useful for neurologists or for researchers as possible, right? So this is the great example of identifying who you can partner with and um, to what end. And there was a chat. Yes, you said, yes, I found some government and nonprofit organizations when I was doing some background research. I'll reach out to them. Thank you. This is so helpful. You're welcome. And I'm so glad that you've done the research and found these organizations, found these government commissions or whatnot who are working in a similar vein. Yes, do your outreach, and I really hope they get back to you, but don't feel like you're overstepping. Keep calling, keep emailing, but make sure you're respectful, of course. Whenever you do any outreach to check with your teachers to make sure there's not a specific policy that you have to follow, and make sure that you are following your school's policy. I know every school is different. But just double check with them when you're doing outreach like this. But I really commend you for doing the research and for starting your outreach. That's great. Okay, so the second, this is still peace of mind. And I wanted to highlight this additional part. He said, also in the field research section, this project will use comprehensive information from National Alzheimer's Coordinating Center (NACC) uniform dataset to design a risk prediction algorithm. Excuse me. So again, we see some partnerships and collaborations. So he's utilizing resources from NACC. He's collaborating with this national organization to develop his implementation a little bit more. And I want to just keep reading. He says, unlike previous methods that have relied on extensive genetic tests and post-diagnosis evaluations, this proposed solution enhances early detection by assessing information on patient factors already recorded in the medical chart. So I touched on, if you remember, innovation, and I mentioned innovation as a way of building off what's already been done. And in this sentence, exactly, he says, unlike previous methods, unlike what's been done, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to change the game by looking at factors already recorded instead of doing extensive genetic testing, right? So this is a great way to have some of that innovation built into or written in your proposal. Okay, the next example I want to talk about is a second place scholarship winner. This is Ready, Set, Safe. This team looked at their quality of life issue was the lack of emergency preparedness of elementary school students in Queens. And let's see what they did. Again, I want you to think about how these students reached out to and collaborated with experts. And so I highlight this right here from their background, from their field research. Um, so, in order to build a lesson, an emergency management specialist and first lieutenant EMT, Felix Cabrera, believed that children are not properly prepared to react in emergencies. So they collaborated with EMTs, emergency management specialist, and a first lieutenant EMT. So they collaborated with this expert they interviewed this expert to identify areas of areas that they could teach the students about how to react in emergencies, right? So they worked with this emergency management specialist to develop a curriculum with which they taught the elementary school students. So this is a collaboration with an expert. Just keeping on, they say we interviewed professionals from various fields, including teachers, EMTs, and police officers, and they all emphasize the importance of educating children on emergency preparedness, especially when adults are unavailable or unable to assist, right? So this team worked with teachers, because if you're going to be educating elementary school students, you need to know how to educate them. So teachers are experts in that field. EMTs, if you're going to be educating them on medical emergencies, EMTs are a great expert and a great source. And police officers, if you want to teach them about other emergencies, safety issues, police officers are a great expert and resource to utilize um, to identify different scenarios and situations to teach children. So these students collaborated with multiple experts. They interviewed them to gather as much information as possible to develop their curriculum. And then lastly, I want to highlight this piece right here. Again, another collaborator, another expert from their implementation section. I'm just going to read from the beginning. To begin our lesson creation, we created a list of what we thought students needed to know. This became our guideline as we developed a slideshow for the students. We worked with Stephen Sharkey, an FDNY firefighter and EMT who owns EXO Workshops. So again, from their research, they created this guide list for the curriculum, and then again partnered and collaborated with another expert, an FDNY firefighter and EMT, who owns and operates a workshop thing, company, organization, and was able to get feedback and edit and strengthen their implementation through this collaboration, right? Excuse me. So these students worked with numerous experts, and these experts were able to help them strengthen their implementation, i.e., the curriculum that they taught these elementary school kids. Okay, the last example I have for you is a third place scholarship winner. This project is called Shell, Students Helping English Language Learners. So their quality of life issue was the lack of academic preparedness and um, specifically for English language learners at their school. And they partnered with a number of experts as well. And their influence or their sphere of influence was focused really inside the school, right? So we're not talking about multi-borough level project. This is a really focused project in their school. And here's how they so so I want to before I continue on, I want to mention if you didn't already notice, but the first example I gave of the Alzheimer's uh, quality of life issue, his impact, his sphere of influence was almost national. So we used national data sets and partnered with Mount Sinai, which is a large hospital network. The second one was throughout the borough. They worked in elementary schools all across Queens. And now this one is focused specifically in their school, right? And I'm not saying, and I don't want to make the implicit association that the more influence you have, the better, because all of these projects are phenomenal. But each student was clear about their sphere of influence and what the scope of their project was going to be. And they worked in that scope to make excellent an implementation as possible, right? So it's about identifying your scope and working within that scope to make measurable impacts, right? Okay. Anyway, so this is the third example. I want you again to think about how these students reached out to and collaborated with experts. So this is their implementation. They started by saying, we initiated our program by meeting with our school's ENL coordinator. Wonderful. They connected with and partnered or collaborated with the ENL coordinator at their school. This is an expert that would know a lot about the needs of English language learning, English language learners, right? And would be able to provide resources for these students in developing their peer tutoring program. Further, we see they say working with the ENL coordinator made this process easy as we got approval to visit all the ENL classes to promote our new tutoring program. So again, working with this expert at their school who has influence and has direct control, right? This ENL coordinator has control to allow these students into the classroom, allow them to speak with the students and to share information about the program. These students were able to broaden their influence, broaden their impact in the school. So this was able to reach more students than just a flyer on the wall. Through this collaboration with the ENL coordinator, these students were able to go into the classroom and actually say, hey, we have this tutoring program, this peer tutoring program. Here's how you sign up. Here's how you participate, right? And further, so later in the implementations, so they're doing all this work, they develop this program, working closely with the ENL coordinator. They say, because of the success of our program, we earned first place in the competition. They had a school-based competition that they presented their program to. Um, and were invited to collaborate with the City Council member Lynn Schulman to help her reach her ELL constituents. Follow-up email was sent to the City Council member expressing our interest to work with her and the people in her community. So they worked on their program, they collaborated with the ENL coordinator, they developed a successful program, and then were invited to collaborate with a city council member. So they're just building and building and building in their sphere of influence to broaden the reach of their program. With the city council members' help, maybe they can bring Shell, this program, into other high schools in that district, right? So this collaboration, this expert that they're working with, Lynn Schulman, has such a wide reach. Now these students, through this collaboration, also have a wide reach, right? So it's really important to think about your scope, do the research to find who else is working in this area, and then do the outreach. Outreach to them and say, hey, I have a great idea, I have a great project, and I think in working together, we can reach even more people, right? We can better the lives of this community. So these three examples, I hope you take some inspiration away. I hope you take some ideas for um, maybe how you could reach out to other organizations, other experts for your own project to broaden the impact of your recommendations, of your solutions in the community, in the environment. And I do want to say every project is different. Every recommendation looks different and will be different. And this outreach process also will be different for every project. So it's not a copy paste, oh, well, Shell did this. I'm going to also do it this way. Each project is unique, is special, and has its own needs, right? So your outreach process may look a little bit different, but the steps are the same. Doing the research of who else is working in this area and actually making the taking the initiative to reach out to them. Okay. And that is everything I have for you today. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you taking the time. If you can, please scan this QR code for the attendance. I'm also going to paste this URL in the chat. This takes you to a Google form um, which just asks you a couple questions to record your attendance. And then I'm going to stick around for a little bit. And our next webinar is February 17th. That is a Tuesday. It's in 2 weeks at the same time. And the link is posted in the Student Resources Hub on the WISE website. So again, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm going to stop my recording and I'm going to stick around for any questions and then to recap the beginning.